Now we're going to be exploring strategies and structures for peace education. Someone once said that strategy is thinking about a choice and choosing to stick with your thinking. Let's welcome Dot Maver and Bill Miller to discuss some of the choices for peace education. Dot is a board trustee founder of the National Peace Academy, a founder of the Global Alliance for Ministries and Infrastructures of Peace, and founding executive director of the River Phoenix Center for Peacebuilding. By the way, she's also famous for her fast pitching technique. You can Google it. Bill Miller is a founder and host of Global Connections Television, which does most of its tapings at the United Nations in New York, and reaching over 70 million potential viewers each week.
Thank you, Michael. Bienvenidos, bienvenue, willkommen, shalom, and welcome to a discussion on peace education strategies and structures of the 2021 Peace Education Conference. My name is Bill Miller, and I'm principal and moderator, CEO of Global Connections Television. Today, I'm delighted that we have one of the most knowledgeable trailblazers in this area, Dr. Dot Maver. Dr. Dot Maver is a founding board member of the National Peace Academy USA. She's also a founder of the Global Alliance for Ministries and Infrastructures of Peace, and she's founder of the River Phoenix Center for Peacebuilding. Dr. Dot Maver, welcome to today's discussion.
Thank you, Bill. Always a joy.
Thank you. I'm so glad we're back together again to talk about this, because you are truly a reservoir of knowledge when it comes to talking about peace education, peace programs, peace building, and these concepts that are so important that we so often don't think about. We may mention them in passing, but we really need to focus more on them. But Dot, let's just open it up. Give me a little overview of your interest and how you perceive this whole concept of peace education.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Bill. You know, when we talk about peace education, education for peace, as you know, both the International Day of Peace resolution and the UNESCO Charter respectively speak to this beautifully when they put a focus on peace through education. And education, educare, to lead out or draw forth. And so I would submit that peace education is how we realize the true self, who we really are, that question that's in all of our hearts, right? All the time. Who am I? What is my purpose? How can I offer my unique contribution in this world? So it really draws forth or leads out the realization of our spiritual beingness. So, and education is both formal and informal. And at the National Peace Academy, we offer this education through the personal, the social, the political, the institutional, and the ecological spheres. So, you know, Bill, if I dare, can I take just a couple minutes? I'd love to share a few
Please
thoughts.
do, yes. And also be sure and put out your website. That's very important.
Okay, nationalpeaceacademy.us. Thank you for that. But you know, we intuitively know that we are part of something much greater than ourselves. We long for that world we know in our hearts, a world in which humanity recognizes that we are part of a sacred system of all life, and that we share a responsibility to help this ever-emerging society as stewards of the planet, and elder brothers and sisters to animals, plants, vegetables, and minerals. It is this world, Bill, in which the central point is the culture of peace. And truly, we could say a culture of peace and nonviolence. It is this world in which peace education is central to all those spheres that I mentioned: personal, social, political, institutional, ecological, the whole picture of our lives. And you know, Buckminster Fuller says it best: you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Now, granted, we're in the midst of an all systems breakdown. However, we are simultaneously in the midst of an all systems breakthrough. And peace education, peace through education, is the key. Peace isn't the opposite of war, nor is peace the absence of violence. It is a dynamic unto itself. And the definition that I always offer is peace is living in right relationship with self, others, and all life. So many of you who are listening and participating will know of John Paul Lederach's work. And his conceptualization of peace building, which is really what is needed on the planet at this time, is a comprehensive concept that encompasses, generates, and sustains the full array of processes, approaches, and stages needed to transform conflict toward more sustainable, peaceful relationships. It's all about right relationship with self, others, and all life. So peace education provides these tools, and social emotional learning is key. In fact, a better indicator of our children's future than their IQ. So it seems clear that more information is not the answer, but rather educating for creativity, lifelong learning, adaptability, and to be a thinker. These, along with other qualities and the principles of sharing and cooperation, are at the very core of what is essential for this breakthrough. For we have only had glimpses of the new, of what is emerging on this beautiful planet we all call home. And if we are basing our thinking and our education on the past, we'll remain in the midst of an all systems breakdown. So, Bill, as we enter into a conversation, I would love to ask a question.
Sure.
Yeah, so and I offer this question to other panelists and to all those watching on web TV, on UN Global Television, through social media. What is the vision? What is our vision as individuals, but more than that, as humanity on this planet right now? Take a minute. Think about that. What is it we actually want? And I submit it as a world in which our precious resources and life energies are directed and expressed for the good of the whole. A world in which spiritual values guide and permeate our being. A world in which new and vaster horizons appear before us, beckoning us onward to greater things, to things unheard and unthought, while our heads and hearts and efforts have been restricted by a belief in separation, in preparations for war, for retaliation, for domination. And to what end? To maintain the futile cycle of violence, nation against nation, person against person? That answer is clearly no. It is too painful. So we're challenged to turn our creative capacities to preparations for peace, for living in right relationship with one another and all life, to a new world, to a culture of peace and nonviolence. And at the heart of that culture, Bill, is peace education.
And to help us achieve that goal, the United Nations has been in the forefront of working towards peace on many fronts. Well, really, since 1945, but it's even back going to 1919 with the founding of the League of Nations. But today, we see so many efforts underway at the United Nations. As you mentioned, the September 21st is the International Day of Peace. 2021 is the International Year of Peace. And of course, we hear a bit, not a lot, as much as we should, about the culture of peace. And Dot, this was developed by the United Nations. And I want to read this to you. I know you're familiar with it, but just for our viewers, and to get feedback from you, because it ties right into what you are talking about. The UN definition, a culture of peace is a set of values, attitudes, traditions, and modes of behaviors and ways of life that reject violence and prevent conflicts by tackling the root causes to solve problems through dialogue and negotiation among individuals, groups, and nations. Why is this so important? And really, how can we achieve it? We're talking about very laudable goals, but how do we get there? How do we move forward in this area?
Yeah, wow. Thank you for putting that into the field. And as we digest that and address the question that you just put forth to all of us, how do we get there? How do we create those conditions? Which we are doing in very many places around the world right now, although it's not getting its fair share of media attention. Let's also remind our viewers, Bill, that today, thanks to Unity Foundation and Peace TV channel, today is the first Peace Education Day, and I'm going to call it an International Peace Education Day. And thank you. Thank you for that. So yes, how do we create those conditions? Well, as you know, one of the groups that I'm involved with is the Global Alliance for Ministries and Infrastructures for Peace. And we founded ourselves in 2005. And, you know, since then, there have been various ministries of peace and different institutionalized peace structures put into governments around the world. Now, we're not taking credit for all of that, but we do know that we have assisted with the dialogue and with the thinking through what it will take to actually shift the institutionalization of violence to institutionalizing peace. And that's a big thought that we can hold. It's also the difference when you mention the UN and the League of Nations leading up to really the founding of the UN in the mid-1940s. And in their charter, they call for themselves, the United Nations, to be a central harmonizing point for all nations. And so I always think about harmony through conflict. You know, we have to address conflict and listen to it, listen to the message that it's offering. And you're quite right, dialogue, such a key, a willingness to really hear the other and be together. That's why restorative justice practices are part of the answer, that big shift in the criminal justice system from punishment to restoration. That's why peace education is part of the answer. Because educating for peace, beginning with me, will impact every area on the planet. That's why clean water is part of the answer. And now there is a large community around the world calling for a world water law, and will likely approach the United Nations with that as well. And so much work is being done by so many of the young people as well. Green Hope Foundation, Kekeshan Basu. And we know that there are billions of trees being planted. Some of these acts, if I plant just one tree or 5 trees or even 20 trees on my property, some of these acts, which may seem quite simple, are actually profound in the sacredness of building this world that's going to work for everyone. So it's going to take the academics, the politicians, the grassroots activists, all the educators, all of us, the social workers, all of those first responders and essential workers, every one of us, the farmers. I've started naming that. I don't want to leave anyone out, but it's going to take all of us working together. And so when you read that out about the shared values and principles and what is being called from us, peace becomes a practice. Peace becomes a practice. And then our structures and our policies support that practice of peace. It will make violence history.
I couldn't agree more. I think you're absolutely right. And as 2 of my guiding principles over the years have been learn more about an issue and get involved. And so throughout our discussion today, I'm going to be pushing out a few websites, and you've jogged my memory so nicely. You were talking about clean water, you were talking about the United Nations. And one thing that we all do, we need to learn more about the United Nations, because the UN is not covered sufficiently by the media. There's no doubt about it. There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of programs and projects underway every day that never get any attention in the media. So our viewers can go to the website www.un.org to look at the overall panoply of the UN programs, agencies, specialized agencies, and otherwise. But an advantage of the UN is that if you are interested in a program like, or something that the Food and Agriculture Organization is promoting, you can go to www.fao.org, or United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, go www.unesco.org. So it's easy to find this information, but we really have to reach out and make an effort to locate it, because it is not being served to us, that's for sure. I was just curious, so how can we better educate the media? I'm part of the media, so I accept culpability on this, but how can we educate a larger part of the media? Because most people in the media don't cover the UN. It's not their fault, they just have other beats. But can we reach out to explain these programs, provide information, get them involved in United Nations Day programs? What can we do with that particular group?
Yeah, thank you for that, Bill. And one of the things over the years, as you know, I've been involved in so many of the spheres that we mentioned, including the political and including some of the media work. And one of the things we can do, and Global Campaign for Peace Education, again, Global Campaign for Peace Education, they're all over social media, and check out their website also, that these things are possible to take a tight program, which is going to give us some video that we can take and offer to our local media stations. Particularly our local cable stations are always willing through the public to receive things that are newsworthy or information worthy, etc. And so this is one of the ways we can get some of this information out that offers a different view of it. You may find yourself pleasantly surprised. So, but it does take, as you say, it does take us getting involved and actually giving that kind of time and energy to getting the word out there.
And there are many organizations in the United States and around the world that we can be involved with to learn more. One that comes to mind, so we really have to be more actively involved.
Yeah, well said. Well said, Bill. And as you mentioned, UNA, this is, I have to say, I love when we have these conversations. So when you mention UNA, you know, one of the beautiful gifts of the River Phoenix Center for Peacebuilding in Gainesville, Florida, USA, is that and that's centerforpeacebuilding.org, we cooperate and partner with many of the groups in the community, and UNA is one of them. The United Nations Association, as Bill says, if you have one in your community, in your country, in your region, be in touch. Often there's just an absolute willingness to cooperate with those of us who are doing this kind of work on the ground to help create the conditions for a culture of sustainability and social justice and cooperation and sharing, all the things that are embedded in a culture of peace. And of course, again, peace education through peace. It's really, or peace through education. You can almost say it either way. One without the other, there's a miss. Yeah, really makes sense. So thank you for that. And the other thing I want to mention, Bill, is Rotary, because Rotary has this beautiful purpose statement, and peace is a big part of their mission. So we have partnered with Rotary all over the world, and including international, Rotary International, and the International Day of Peace, as you know, partners with Rotary International. So yeah, that's another thing. If you're looking for a way to get the word out, maybe be invited to speak at your local Rotary. Maybe you're a member and can bring somebody in to speak, you know, or offer to show one of these clips from Peace Education Day. Yeah, that would be wonderful.
I am so glad you brought up Rotary. I am a Rotarian. Full disclosure, a past history governor with Rotary, but I have been involved with Rotary for many, many years. But just not only Rotary, but service clubs in general. I'm thinking about Kiwanis. They've had a working partnership with UNICEF on iodine deficiency disorder programs. Lions have had a working relationship with the United Nations, but Rotary has had a massive relationship going back to the creation of the United Nations in 1945 in San Francisco, California. And there are just so many projects that Rotary and the UN have worked on. And of course, the fourth object of Rotary is to promote world peace, international cooperation, and world understanding. And those two organizations, their goals tie into one another, because the UN basically is designed to eliminate the scourge of war, promote economic and social development, and to enhance human rights. But we could spend days talking about the projects.
I want to go big picture philosophically just for a moment again, as the theme of this day is peace education and how we educate ourselves beginning from a very young age. And I will say three key things as far as I'm concerned: living in right relationship, right, with self, others, and all life. So right relationship or harmonious relationship. The principle of sharing and the spirit of cooperation. And in my heart, those three sit as a triangle at the heart of peace education. So when we look, as you just brought up, we look back at the United Nations and its founding. And what an incredible moment for the consciousness of humanity. We have yet to realize this, Bill, fully out here, because we're not doing what the potential is yet to its fullness. We're not yet living in a culture of peace and harmony. However, when the UN was founded, we gave to ourselves the gift of shifting from peace through force to peace through diplomacy and development. And that shift, obviously, we have only to look in the direction of our brothers and sisters in Afghanistan in this moment, and, blessings to all beings. As we continue to make that shift from forcing peace, which again, peace is not just the absence of war, or the opposite of war, or the absence of violence. As we create the conditions for diplomacy, 100%, for dialogue, for development, all the things you just named with Rotary alone, never mind all the other groups around the world, and UNESCO, and so many groups offering so many opportunities to truly work together so that everyone's needs get met. Needs. Because it is true, we are an abundant planet, and there is enough for all needs to get met. And I look at the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations as a blueprint. We could educate ourselves about that as a blueprint for a culture of peace.
We certainly can. And as you've been talking about these needs, it just jogged my memory that one of the most important initiatives of the United Nations to meet these needs and to help create, quote, this better world that we all want is through the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And as we think back, they were adopted by the UN General Assembly in 2015. It's a 15-year continuum, so to speak, starting in 2016 through 2030. There are 17 laudable, practical, achievable goals to eliminate poverty, to eradicate hunger, to empower women, to combat climate change. How do these 17 goals tie into what we're talking about today and the involvement of faith-based groups, service clubs, the general public in helping to develop a better world?
Well, I'm going to harken back to an earlier comment that Kekeshan Basu, when she was 12 years old, founded Green Hope Foundation. And this is primarily a group of youth. She's a bit older now, and just doing fabulous work cooperatively, right, around the world in the spirit of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, looking at through the lens of peace by 2030. But really peace now, when we talk about it, and you talk about faith groups and others, so that we hold the definition of peace in this right relationship lens. Because unless we are cooperatively interactive with meeting the needs of the planet as well, and the Sustainable Development Goals give us hints about all of it, and ways through, right? The planet and water and basic needs and institutions across the board as you look at all 17 of them. And so what Kekishan and her group have done, working in concert with groups around the world, including the groups working to end all nuclear war, like never again, is tying that directly to the SDGs. And the Sign Network and Unity Earth are calling for peace by 2030. All of that is tied together. So if we can get a tipping point on this planet, and now we are speaking to everyone who's listening to this and participating and thinking about how you might want to get involved, do check out the Sustainable Development Goals. Do check out Green Hope Foundation and the list that Bill has offered. And if you want to get involved in your country on a grassroots level, there are so many opportunities. And one of them mentioned earlier is the Global Alliance for Ministries and Infrastructures for Peace, and that's GAMIP.org, GAMIP.org. So yes, I mean, goodness, the list goes on, Bill, but let us continue to seed the field.
Things that we can do to promote peace, to encourage peace, to involve our friends, neighbors, relatives in helping with this campaign. But we do have to get much more involved. And we see we're living in really more of a dysfunctional world to a large degree today, not because of what agencies haven't done, but because of so many myths, so much misunderstanding, so much misinformation that's floating around, that we really need to focus and to bring our attention back to dealing with these problems and really try to be effective. Well, Dot, let me ask you in closing, do you have any last moment or last minute messages that you would like to convey before we sign off?
Yeah, there's two things I'd like to say. Thank you for that, Bill. One, Helena Blavatsky, one of the founders of the Theosophical Society, once said, "There is no religion higher than truth," as you speak to that. And so for me, there's always a capital T, truth, and then there's no matter what you're looking at, truth is a funny thing. Which side is the handle on? So it depends on how you're looking at it. And the second thing I want to say, I want to remind all of us that we are living in one of the highest bell curve challenging moments in the great arc of evolution on this planet, of humanity's journey. And so there's a big change here. Humanity is undergoing its own version of a chrysalis experience. We are not going to fix the caterpillar. We need to help the butterfly dry its wings and become free to fly. And that is part of the journey for all of us. So may peace prevail on earth.
That is a perfect way to close our program. But Dr. Dot Maver, I want to thank you for a very interesting and a very informative discussion, and keep up the great work that you're doing. And I'm positive that we will have positive changes that will be made in the future. Also, I want to thank all of the folks who are involved in putting on this Peace Education Conference, and to thank all of the viewers who joined us today. And please reach out to the resources that we mentioned and many others that are in your area, and to get involved with them and to really help to create that better world. So for today, thank you.
you so much. Thank you again. Thank you. I'm Melvin Kelly, Karen and Keeple, Dennis Sherbakov. Thank you so much. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you.
The late Benazir Bhutto was Prime Minister of Pakistan, the first woman to head a Muslim state. She said, "I have found that those who do achieve peace never acquiesce to obstacles, especially those constructed of bigotry, intolerance, and inflexible tradition." I'm sure our next speaker agrees. Dr. Kozue Akibayashi is a feminist researcher, activist, and works on issues of gender and peace. She is a professor at Graduate School of Global Studies, Doshisha University in Kyoto, Japan, and past president of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. Here she is in conversation with Dr. Tony Jenkins. Please welcome Dr. Kozue Akibayashi.
So it's my great pleasure to introduce to you next Dr. Kozue Akibayashi. She is a professor at the Graduate School of Global Studies at Doshisha University in Kyoto, Japan. Her research and activism is based on analyzing militarism, militarization, demilitarization, and decolonization from a gender perspective. She is an Asia Pacific board representative and the former international president of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and has been a member of the organization for more than 2 decades. And she also currently serves on the steering committee of Women Cross DMZ, a global movement of women mobilizing for peace on the Korean Peninsula. And in 2015, she was in the delegation of 30 international women peacebuilders who crossed the DMZ on a call for lasting peace. And then more specific in Japan, a highlight of Kozue's research and activism has been connected to Okinawan Women Act Against Military Violence, a feminist peace movement in Okinawa, Japan, where the US military has been stationed for more than 7 decades. So welcome, Kozue.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you very much for a very kind introduction. I feel that I don't need to introduce myself or even talk for the session, but I am honored to be included in this panel on peace education in international and its role in the international community, as I understand. My work in the field of peace education, but also in the peace activism, is pretty much explained by Tony. But I identify myself as a researcher / activist and educator, actually. So all these 3 aspects are integral to whatever I do in activism, research, and education. I have been able to teach at the university and graduate school, but I have been also involved in informal and non-formal learning for peace in the feminist community. Particularly, I have been active in international feminist peace movements, and in analyzing the impact of militarism and militarization in different communities, particularly on host communities, is what we call of the U.S. military overseas. But there are many other militaries as well, but of course, I'm sure you are aware that the U.S. military is largest by far and has its presence all over the world, particularly in a very small part of Japan called Okinawa. It's the southernmost part of Japan, and I am a Japanese citizen. And this part of Japan called Okinawa is colonized in the late 19th century, and became part of of Japan, modern state of Japan. And its history, their history is very much of militarism and colonialism by Japan and other parts of the world. And for the past over 20 years, actually, I have been working with this feminist peace group or movement in Okinawa. Okinawa Women Act Against Military Violence, and I have I'm trying to, I think I have been trying to make to expand their international network with the feminist, peace activists, educator, researchers who also focuses on feminist analysis of militarism, militarization, and the military itself, and how we can transform our world to a demilitarized one, and with significant disarmament. It's so I and the part and other part of my networking include Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. I'm sure many of you know, I hope, know that this is the WELF is the oldest women's international peace organization, started in 1915. It's a bit sad to say that we are still around to achieve our goal that we set over 100 years ago, to make a world peaceful one where women's rights are fully acknowledged and assured and demilitarized, in the world that is demilitarized. And we believe that that is necessary for planetary survival. So WILF has focused our efforts on disarmament, achievement of women's human rights, achievement of fair and just economic system, and peace, that where we can where everyone feels safe and respected.
Thank you, Kozue. You mentioned that you've been doing this work for 20 years now, and I was just thinking this morning back to the last times that we were in a classroom together at Teachers College, Columbia University, and I think probably about 20 years ago we were teaching co-teaching a course on disarmament education and educating for global security. So I wonder, so that just dates us a little bit, how long we've known each other, and how long we've been doing this. But I bring that up because I'm curious about what that looks like in your practice now. So when you're talking about these contexts in Okinawa and the peace education work that you do through WILF, what does that look like in practice for you?
With other networks as well, the feminist peace networks, such as International Women's Network Against the Militarism. They are a similar name, but this is a network of feminist peace, again, researchers and educators and activists, to envision what demilitarized security or a humane security looks like. And this is a part of the work that we started, I think, at Teachers College, Columbia University, and a peace education program that Tony, you headed for you upheld the program for quite a long time. And with our mentor, Dr. Betty Reardon, I think you and I were inspired by her, to say the least, by her work and enthusiasm and dedication and everything, commitment. To again, the importance of envisioning the world that we want to achieve in hopefully in the near future. And one of them was to identify the basic conditions of humane security. And I'm trying to use the term humane security to make it clear that this is different from human security that I think was in a way hijacked by the UN, militarized part of the UN community. So our vision of humane security include assuring natural environment, or protecting the natural environment for all human beings and other living creatures, and meeting basic needs for everyone: clothes, shelter, food, education, and medical medical or health services, and respecting everyone's dignity, cultural, sexual, gender, and all individual identity, but also group identity, human dignity. Respecting human dignity is the third point, and the fourth dimension is protecting from preventing avoidable harm. This is a bit of the peace studies term, going probably back to Johan Galtung, that we need to be aware what harms are avoidable and preventable, and we should be prepared for that. And for example, war, armed conflict is a harm that is preventable and avoidable if we have proper or adequate policies, or even mechanisms and settings. Natural disasters to some extent is avoidable when we think about the climate change, climate crisis that was human made. But we also need to be prepared for anything like floodings and so forth happens. Some measures should be prepared so that people could evacuate if necessary. People could be prepared for the losses that are anticipated and so forth. So this is one of the examples of the collaboration, I think, of feminist peace educators and activists and researchers.
That's fantastic. I'm going to steal this framing of humane versus human security. I think that's a really important and integral shift. And as you point out, it was really the feminists who first envisioned the concept of human security as being people-centered, as kind of rooted into the day-to-day reality of human beings, as opposed to the security of nation states. You mentioned a number of things, various kind of feminist contributions to the field of international peace and security. But what about some more specific contributions from feminists to even peace education practice? I mean, obviously envisioning is part of it too, but what are some of the other things that you think are really important feminist contributions to our work?
I think the very, very important aspect of contribution of feminist peace educators or activists in the field of peace education, I think it lies in the non-formal setting, learning, and the kind of I think activities that I have been involved. through or involved in the past 25 some years, through various networks of civil society. And one of the things I think we, the feminist peace activist contribution to learning for peace is how I think would describe peace education that I have been practicing. Learning for peace by feminist is to analyze the power structure, namely patriarchy, and probably in the tradition of Paulo Freire naming the world. I think it's a feminist version of naming the world and the power structure that we came up with. The structure of a patriarchy, but probably more recent years, intersectional dimension of patriarchy, or intersectional nature, I think, of patriarchy. Not only oppression that women have experienced, but of course we are aware that different women have different experiences, and that difference, of course, comes from different attributes. Ethnicity, racism is of course one of them. Colonialism is one of them. Manifestation of militarism on women differ from maybe place to place, from time to time, and bringing these experiences together. I think we have our feminist community, peace community of learning, was able to show what the oppressive structure looks like and functions.
Thank you, Kozue. I wonder if I might take 2 steps back and ask you really quickly just how you got involved in this work in the first place. What has been your source of motivation, and how and why do you continue doing what you've been doing all this time?
The very first motivation is that as a younger girl, I thought there was something wrong with young, with girls not being able to fool yourself and so forth. It's a very first, I think, starting point. Then and I also thought something about like educational learning would be a key to transformation or changing the kind of situation that I wasn't really happy about myself, but also wanting, about myself, I think. And it wasn't really the politics that I was interested in. So I wanted to, after finishing the college in Japan, I wanted to study, learn more about peace, learning for peace, and I wanted to study with a feminist. And that's how I found Betty Reardon at Teachers College, Columbia University. And I started my graduate work there in New York. Interestingly, my encounter with the Okinawa Women Act Against Military Violence, women's peace, feminist peace movement in Okinawa, though they are from Japan. I met them in New York, actually, in Betty's class, Gender and Global Issues, I think, where Okinawa Women Act Against Military Violence was invited to give their presentation and talk and analysis of the problem of militarized security and their colonized history. And that was 1996, and that's when I started to research on them and to work with them. It was my action research that I did for my dissertation, And I'm still doing that because I made what they kind of, or I made, they kind of made me, or I made promise that that I would work with them, Okinawa women, until these problems are solved. Unfortunately, we still have to work really hard. And in the meantime, I have been able to meet with other fantastic and insightful feminist peace activists. The ones I met in for International Women's Network Against Militarism, War Women Cross DMZ in my region. And that also, the solidarity and the feminist solidarity, I think, is a motivation to continue my work.
I would imagine that solidarity is also a sustaining factor as well. It's so hard to do this work if you don't have a community of others to keep you going.
Exactly.
Well, I wonder, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience today about your work in peace education, other things that they should know specifically about your work, or other thoughts just in general related to peace education you'd like to share with us today?
Recently, very recently, I have been more specifically involved in a peace movement to end the Korean War. In the U.S. context, I think you are talking about the longest war in Afghanistan, and that's 20 years. Well, actually, the longest war that the United States is waging is the Korean War. That's 7 decades long. So, living in Japan, and almost my entire life, I wasn't really aware of the other Korean War itself either. It's often called for a forgotten war, or never the war that is never learned outside the Korean Peninsula, and that's how I think it. The international community international community neglected entirely the responsibility of of that war itself, the beginning of that war itself, but leaving it as it is. And because the war may be far from many of you in the United States, it's not really affecting a large population, and I think that's a structure that we need to be aware that confinement of the other violence somewhere farther from, somewhere out there, somewhere that doesn't really relate to you, would actually sustain militarism and even intensify militarization when the crisis is emphasized, and that would that can be used as an excuse for military buildups in all over the world. And that's when suddenly the local conflict of the Korean Peninsula is globalized in the context of global militarization. So I think something that I hope that I can share also today is a very specific action that the Korean War needs to be ended now by the international community.
I can't thank you enough for saying that. This is totally an anecdote here, but a couple of days ago, I was taking a trivial quiz on the New York Times, and they were, as of course now we're withdrawing from Afghanistan. The question was, what has been the longest duration enduring war that the U.S. has been engaged in? And I answered Korea right away. I was like, I know this answer. But they said I got it wrong. So I'm glad that you're on record today to set the New York Times right. And obviously, as so many other people around the world are certainly here in the United States, we're not aware of the fact that this is an enduring legacy of war and this really dubious negative piece that exists there that we need to be really concerned with. So thank you.
Thank you.
I am resilient, I trust the movement, I negate the chaos, uplift the negative. I'll show up at the table again and again and again. I'll close my mouth and learn to listen. Whoa, whoa, oh, oh. 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 These times are poignant, the winds have shifted. It's all we can do to stay uplifted. Pipelines through backyards, wolves howling out fronts. Yeah, I got my crew, but truth is what I want. Realigned and on point, power to the peaceful, prayers to the waters, women at the center, all vessels open to give and receive. Let's see the system brought down to its knees. Whoa, whoa, oh, oh. Whoa, whoa, oh, oh. Whoa, whoa, oh, oh. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Whoa, whoa, oh, oh. Whoa, whoa, oh, oh. Whoa, whoa, oh, oh. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Ooh, ooh, ooh. I'm made of thunder, I'm made of lightning, I'm made of dirt, yeah, made of the fine things. My father taught me that I'm a speck of dust and this world was made for me. So let's go and try our luck, said I've got my roots down, 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 down deep. I've got my roots down, 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 down deep. I've got my roots down, down, down deep. I've got my roots down, down, down deep. So what are we doing here? What has been done? What are you gonna do about it when the world comes undone? My voice feels tiny, and I'm sure so does yours. Put us all together, make a mighty I am resilient, I trust the movement, I negate the chaos, uplift the negative. I'll show up at the table again and again and again. I'll close my mouth and learn to listen.
Show me the money. In the movies, that line came from Jerry Maguire. but in real life, it comes from Jim Chu. He's the founder and CEO of Untapped Global. Based in San Francisco with teams in East Africa, West Africa, the Caribbean, and Europe, Untapped Global promotes peace education as profitable investment. He'll be talking with Melissa Jun Rowley, a groundbreaking journalist who covers frontier tech gender issues and international development.
All right. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Melissa. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for joining us for Peace Education Day. So we've
Thanks for
known
having
each other. Yeah, absolutely. So we've known each other for almost a year, maybe a little. We were introduced over a year ago. And since then, I've learned a lot about your history, your expertise, and your background as an entrepreneur. You're a serial entrepreneur and a serial investor. And you've chosen to take on the mission of finding ways for people to invest in small businesses and emerging markets, and also to promote tech ecosystems, startup ecosystems in those markets as well. What inspired you to do this?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a true believer that investment is one of the best ways to promote economic growth and equitable economic growth, and really solve problems, daily problems in every market, whether that's in a developed market or in frontier markets that are developing. And so I think that belief stems from decades of work in business, initially in the tech industry. So my first 2 decades of my career in the 90s and 2000s were really focused on just being a tech entrepreneur and investor, mostly in Silicon Valley, also a little bit in Europe. But in 2010, I was lured to Haiti after the earthquake, like many people were, as a volunteer to really help out after the earthquake there. And initially, we did a very typical NGO work, putting water systems in IDP camps, in refugee camps, and also doing a lot of other work in churches and orphanages. But it occurred to me that that kind of aid wasn't really sustainable. And so coming from a business background, I instead launched a company to address the same issues. How do you get clean water to more of the population in Haiti? And found that that was a much more effective way at creating a sustainable solution to some of those problems. And not only was it a sustainable solution, it actually helped so many people develop a dignified future, a dignified path towards economic empowerment. You know, I think one of the issues with aid is that it takes away power from local populations. And it oftentimes takes away economic opportunity for these populations. And both things create both emotional and political and social instability. And so by creating more investment opportunities, putting more investment dollars into these countries, our belief is that it's going to create a much more equitable economic development path, and thereby create more confident population and a society that just functions a lot more smoothly.
Yeah, yeah. And throughout all of your traveling, because you're an international man of mystery, global traveler, through business and through all of your love for adventure, have you gotten to see firsthand what these opportunities do for communities that you're working in, and how it can shift or change the atmosphere and the just the mood and the general well-being of the people?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's about future and hope versus despair and looking for help, right? I think it's, you know, when I see people who suddenly have the opportunity to create their own business and pay for things themselves, it creates a self-confidence that creates hope for themselves and for their families and for their communities. And the mentality changes. It isn't about a zero-sum game anymore. It's about how do we create something better together. And that sounds very kumbaya-ish, but I've just seen it time and time again that when people have opportunity, they do something with that opportunity. They create value with that opportunity. And then they want to give back to others to create that opportunity. Whereas I think sometimes just taking a handout just makes you feel worse, right? And it makes you feel that you're taking away from society. And so I think creating that opportunity has been and I've seen this firsthand, has just been so empowering for both individuals and communities. And ultimately, it comes down to agency and resilience. People want to be able to have control over their destiny, if you will. And they want to be able to have the resilience to be able to respond to disasters, whether they're man-made disasters, political disasters, or natural disasters.
And tell me about Untapped, and specifically how Untapped enables more investments into emerging markets.
Yeah, so our goal at Untapped is to figure out how to get more financing to small businesses in emerging markets. There's a massive gap or massive hole in emerging markets on how small businesses, especially those who are coming from the informal sector, how they get access to financing. Usually you have to already be in the system to be able to get financing. And there is microfinance, but oftentimes that's very small dollars and doesn't really move the needle for many businesses. So what we've developed is a way to both safely for investors, but also scalably in the marketplaces that we're in, deploy capital to small businesses so they can grow. Whether that's delivering mobility services, motorcycle taxis or car taxis or clean water, all that stuff requires a lot of equipment, and all that equipment is costly. And unless you have the money, unless you have a rich uncle or a rich aunt in the US or Europe, there's really no way for you as a small entrepreneur in these countries, whether you're in Kenya or South Africa or Nigeria, to get the capital to start these businesses. Or even if you have a business already, to get capital to grow your business. So what we do is we provide something that we call smart asset financing. So instead of giving cash for folks to spend on whatever they want, we provide entrepreneurs with the equipment they need to be able to grow their businesses and generate revenue directly from the equipment itself. And because of all this digitization and technology that's out there these days, we use that technology to capture the payments and ensure that our investors get paid back, but also that the entrepreneurs are, if you will, only paying if they succeed, right? The more money that they make, the more they use the assets that we provide them, the more money they make and the more our investors get paid back. So it's really a win-win for both the entrepreneurs and for our investors, because they're sharing the wealth and the value that's created from the businesses that's helped by all the equipment that we provide.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, it's really, I think, an exciting time for fintech, exciting time for the way digitization is being harnessed. There's been so much talk, I'm sure you're aware of tech for good and the whole concept of that, and mobile pilots that were taking place years ago and probably still are, and things, just everybody using their phone for things. But I think this whole fintech revolution that's being geared into democratizing investing is actually truly groundbreaking. It's a wave of tech for good that I think is really, really able to penetrate at different pockets of the globe.
Yeah, indeed, it is. And I think one of the exciting things about it from a frontier market perspective, or even from an African perspective, is that there's an opportunity to leapfrog. There's an opportunity for markets like those in Africa to say, okay, well, we don't have to build all that complicated banking infrastructure to provide access to finance. We don't have to do it the same way that Europe and the US has done it. And to use that technology revolution to do something that is more efficient, better, more democratic than how finance works in the United States, for example. And so, what we're doing on Untapped, we hope, is one of those examples. Now, this is a rethinking of how financing is delivered to small businesses. So it isn't the conventional lending model, but rather a technology-driven model that we believe is safer, much more scalable than how finance has been done in the United States and Europe for decades, if not hundreds of years. So I think this really is a revolution, and potentially it has the potential to allow Africa to really leapfrog other markets.
Yeah, absolutely. So for people who aren't able to travel to some of the places that you've been to and able to work on the ground, seeing how businesses really do keep these communities and society running, what are some, I mean, I guess what's the biggest takeaway or one of the biggest lessons you've learned from watching some of the business owners, these small business owners in emerging markets? The reason I ask is because until I started writing about entrepreneurship and really studying it, and especially going overseas to developing countries and learning about what entrepreneurship is in those places, I never saw it as a means for peace. Because growing up in the United States and living in the Western world, I saw it as capitalism, empowerment, ways to do good. But it wasn't until I spent some time in the Middle East and saw some places in Africa where I saw it really is, I mean, it is such an underlying potential infrastructure to promote peace and to keep it going.
Yeah, I mean, I think economic anxiety is such a primary source of conflict. It's a driver for envy. It's a driver for the need to go and create conflicts with your neighbors, whether those neighbors are next door or even across the border. And so I'm a firm believer that creating that economic confidence, if you will, that self-assuredness that, hey, I have a future and I have a future through working and creating businesses in my community. I'm a firm believer that will prevent many drivers of conflict in the world.
Great. I don't have any other questions. Is there anything that you would like to add?
Well, I think going back to the question you just asked, I think it's hard to understand until you meet some of the individuals who have gone through this process, this transformation, how it goes from economic anxiety and anxiety about the future to seeing the possibilities and being given the opportunities to do something. And once some of those seeds bear fruit, you can see the mentality shift. And I think at the end of the day, this is all about human to human interaction. And so I really challenge people to create those human to human interactions in a structure that is not just a tourist. And tourism is fine, but in a structure that is about economic exchange, right? So it shouldn't be a gift, right? An investor from the United States should be able to go to or even work with remotely entrepreneurs in Africa or Southeast Asia or in Latin America, get to know them, help them invest their money into helping those companies grow or those businesses grow and realize a return. And at the same time, those businesses and companies have that hope and anxiety or hope and confidence in the future that they otherwise would not have. Yeah. So that's really my call to action or challenge to American investors, to European investors, to think about addressing peace, not just by talking about it, but putting your money where your ideals are and investing in emerging markets so that you can create a more confident economic development for the future.
Beautiful.
Small businesses are the backbone of every economy. But in many emerging markets, small businesses are left out from financing. According to the World Bank, the funding gap for small businesses in developing markets is $5.2 trillion. Yes, trillion. But the game is changing. Frontier markets, like those in Africa, are digitizing at lightning speeds. This creates an unprecedented opportunity to reinvent how small businesses get money and grow. And the opportunity is enormous. I'm Jim. I've been an entrepreneur and an investor for the past 30 years. I meet incredible people with incredible talent everywhere I go. Too often, many of them lack access to the opportunity to reach their full potential. We created Untapped to create that opportunity. How do we do it? We developed a digital platform called Smart Asset Financing to put hard-to-finance equipment in the hands of entrepreneurs who then use it to grow their businesses, providing clean water, energy, and mobility to their communities. Investors like you can connect directly with entrepreneurs across multiple industries, geographies, and currencies, all in one place. For example, meet Paygas, a company helping thousands living in townships across South Africa access affordable energy close to their homes. Untapped provides them the capital, on demand, to grow and serve as many people as they can. We use technology to make it safe, easy, and rewarding for investors like you to invest in companies like Paygas. Our platform tells you where each asset is, how much revenue it's generating, and how much money you make in return, all in real time. And it works. In just our first year, our team based in the US, the Caribbean, and across Africa have helped over 500 entrepreneurs in countries like Haiti, Kenya, Mali, Uganda, and South Africa grow their businesses and serve thousands of customers. With the right kind of financing and your support, thousands will be millions. I'm dedicating the next 30 years of my life to transform how financing gets done in emerging markets. Join us to help entrepreneurs scale to their full potential. Invest with Untapped and create opportunity.
We've all been sitting in our chairs for quite a while now. We're going to learn how to do yoga while sitting in our chairs, just as we would if we were confined to a wheelchair. Mira is the founder of Global Family Yoga and has a degree in child psychology. She uses yoga as a tool for transformation. Mira, namaste.
Thank you, Michael. As we gather around the topic of peace education, I'd like to share the perspective of as within, so without. My experience is using yoga as a developmental tool for children. The word yoga means union or unity. Unity is peace, and peace begins with me. It's an inside job. When I am peaceful, there's one more peaceful person in the world. Each person who strives for peace within increases peace on earth. Today, I'd like to share some practical techniques to cultivate peace within. So let's start with the nervous system. The autonomic nervous system has two modes, the stress response and the relaxation response. Stress is beneficial. We need that energy and focus to jump out of the road and avoid an oncoming car or to focus for a test. It's when that stress becomes chronic that it causes chaos in the body and the mind. Our breath is intricately interconnected to the nervous system. It's like the dial for the nervous system. Every inhale we take is an alerting response in the nervous system, and every exhalation is a relaxation response. So we want to focus on getting a full and complete exhalation. I'll show you a few simple techniques that you can use to do that. Once we cultivate a foundational awareness of both our body and our breath, we can really step into the world from a sense of peace and spaciousness and freedom from within. Then our interactions and our communications and our choices are going to be more peaceful. Ultimately, yoga is a practice of stilling the fluctuations in the mind. So we have that clear lake that we can see more clearly. When we're agitated or feel separate, that's when there starts to be more conflict in the world. So taking care of peace within us helps us to take care of peace within the world. So here are my daily habits for peace. You can do this in the morning before work or school. Teachers can use this in the classroom to start a lesson, to refocus the class, or at the end of the day to integrate the day. The first technique is called crocodile breathing. We're going to lay on the floor like a crocodile. Now, if you can actually do this in the space you're in right now, I recommend that you do so. You want to lay down on a firm surface, not a bed, that's too squishy, but a carpeted floor or a mat or a pad of some kind. When you're laying on the floor face down, you're going to stack one hand on top of the other and turn your head to rest a cheek on your stacked hands. You can even let your big toes touch and your heels fall away. The reason you want to lay belly down on the floor is because it gives you a lot of feedback about your breath. Oftentimes it's hard to take a full inhale into the belly. There's a lot of tension in the abdominal area. So when we lay on the floor and breathe in, you can feel your belly spread out on the floor. And then as you exhale, your whole body relaxes into the floor. You can do this for just a few minutes and it will make a big difference. Breathe in, belly spreads out on the floor. Breathe out, your whole body settles into the ground. We have to retrain our breath oftentimes, and so you want to do this every day, maybe 2 or 3 times a day. Just lay on the floor and feel your breath in your belly. Then, when you find yourself in an anxious situation or a nervous situation, you can put your hands on your belly and get that same effect as being on the floor, and you'll have practiced it, so you're training your breath to breathe better. And remember, you want to focus on lengthening the exhale. Lengthening the exhale will tell your body that the stress response is no longer needed and we can go back to rest and digest. It's really that simple. Sometimes we think, oh, that's too easy. It couldn't be that easy. But just like you've heard before, we can't solve a problem at the level it was created. In our very complicated lives, sometimes a simple solution like lengthening your exhale is just the answer that we need. Another technique I want to share with you is using the body. So a few simple body postures can really make a difference in your day. The first one I love to share with kids is the superhero pose. Just like it sounds, you're going to stand up with your feet a little bit wider than your hips and just put your hands on your hips. stand there for about 2 minutes. If you want to ask your phone to set a timer for 2 minutes so you know it's been 2 minutes, you can do that. You can also focus on your deep breathing while you're doing it. As you hold your body in this position, it's actually sending a message to your brain. When we're scared, our body contracts, or when our body contracts, we start to feel fearful. So when our body is open and we're standing strong, we feel more confident, and then we can step into the world as peace builders. There's a couple of yoga poses that are fun to do as well. One is triangle pose. Did you know triangle is the strongest shape in the universe? So when you stand with your feet wide and one foot turned out and tip into the shape of a triangle, hold that for 5 to 8 relaxing breaths and notice how you feel after doing that. Switch sides and do the same thing on the other side. And this takes about a minute and it could really shift your day. Connecting with nature is another great way to feel peaceful within. I mean, trees are not stressed out about what they look like or who's friends with them. So when we're in nature, we naturally feel more authentically ourselves and more with the rhythms of nature. And so to be a tree pose is a great way to do that. So you stand on one foot and bring your other inside of your foot to the inside of your leg. And then feel roots growing down into the ground. Actually visualize roots coming out of your feet. And then you can bring your hands together in front of your heart to feel more stable, or you can reach your arms up and let your leaves flutter in the breeze. Hold steady for 3 to 5 breaths, and then put both feet on the ground and change sides and do the same thing on the other foot. This is tree pose, and you can do it anytime you want to feel more stable and grounded. And it helps to keep your eyes steady. When your eyes are steady, it's easier to balance. Now we can turn this tree pose into a fun game called Wind in the Trees. You just need 2 people or more, and half of the group is in tree pose, and then the other half is the wind. So you're going to hold tree pose where other people are running around pretending like they're the wind. And that helps us to practice holding steady even when there's a lot of disturbance around us. This is a fun thing to do in a family yoga class where the grown-ups are trees and the kids get to be the wind and run around. And then after you do each side, you switch places. So now the wind is going to become the tree and the trees get to be the wind. And the kids think this is really fun when their parents are then the wind. And so you can do this with yourself, with your kids at home, with a friend at work, or in a classroom setting. And so using your body to create some stability is a great way to settle the nervous system, feel more stable and grounded, have that foundational awareness of your body, and become a peace builder in the world. And now I would like to share with you some of my favorite techniques for cultivating peace within. And these are called mudras, or hand gestures. They're really handy because they're like little mini yoga poses for your hands, and you always have them in your pocket and you can take them out and use them anywhere you need to. The first one I'd like to show you is called turtle in a shell. You put your thumbs inside your palms and wrap your fingers over your thumbs and just rest your hands down on your lap. If you can do this now while you're watching, please do so. And notice how you feel. What's the quality of energy in your body right now? And how is your breath moving? And what is the quality of the thoughts in your mind? I taught this to a group of kids in a program that I teach called Anxious to Awesome. 9-year-old Riley came in. She was taking the class because there was a boy in class who was really teasing her a lot, and it was very stressful for her to be bullied that way on a daily basis. So when I taught her this mudra, or hand gesture, turtle in a shell, she right away said, "Oh, this feels great. I know I'm going to use this the next time this boy is bothering me." So the next week in class, we did our check-in, and she said, "Oh, I do this all the time." And I taught it to my sister, and she does it all the time too. And I taught it to my best friend, and she does it all the time now too. So these hand gestures are contagious, and kids know that they can whip them out and do them anytime, anywhere, and you can too. Another one I'd like to teach you is called the heart flower mudra. So just bring your hands together in front of your heart, and then you're going to keep your pinkies and thumbs and the heels of your hand connected, and just stretch out your middle fingers. And you might find that it's hard to stretch your fingers, and just like a yoga pose, a little bit of practice and stretching and you'll be able to do it. As you stretch your fingers out, you can close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. Feel your breath and just notice, what is the quality of your mind and your breath and the energy in your body as you hold your hands in this position. You can even pretend you're holding a flower and notice the smell of the flower and the color of the flower as well. This might be the energy that you want to cultivate at some moment in your day. The third hand gesture I'd like to share with you is called the whole world mudra. You simply take the fingertips of one hand to touch the fingertips of the other hand with your palms open wide. Now, you've probably seen this before, right? When someone's thinking, you just might spontaneously do this. And that does help you to open your mind. So if you're looking for a novel solution, or you just want a moment of repose, the whole world mudra is a great gesture for you. You can hold it at the level of the navel, relax your shoulders and sit up tall. And again, notice how it feels. Taking a moment to hold your hands in a certain shape and feel your breath can reset and shift your mood, your awareness, and your energy. So very quickly, you can get out of a state of reactivity or nervousness or worry or lack of focus and come back to center. And so when we can incorporate these kinds of techniques on a daily basis, and they are so simple and we can do them anywhere at any time, they really allow us to reduce stressful feelings, increase peace, and then we can step forward into the world with a true sense of internal freedom that we can share with the world.
Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, darling, kiss me. Let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true. In other words, I love you, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you.
Here's another quote. This one from Rigoberta M. Enchutum, a Guatemalan feminist, indigenous rights activist, and peacemaker. Peace cannot exist without justice. Justice cannot exist without fairness. Fairness cannot exist without development. Development cannot exist without democracy. Democracy cannot exist without respect for the identity and the worth of cultures and peoples. Zolaykha Sherzad and Tucker Robbins embody this concept, finding strategies to incorporate cultural ideals and traditions into modern commerce. Zolaykha Sherzad is founder and creative designer of Zarif Design, collaborating with Afghan women to adapt traditional Afghan cuts and textiles to modern design. Tucker Robbins created thriving artisan workshops in Guatemala, Philippines, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and Cameroon. Supporting indigenous cultures, he partners with tribal chiefs, Arabian sheikhs, and village artisans to make sustainable furniture with its own life and spirit. The two are interviewed by Dr. Darlene Shelton, community psychologist and founder and executive producer at peacechannel.com. Supporting a Global Peace Education Day.
Hello, I'm Dr. Darlene Shelton, and I am a co-founder of Peace Channel, and we want to welcome you to the Peace Channel family. We are so happy today to participate in Peace Education Day, and I am happy to introduce some guests with me. The first is Tucker Robbins. Tucker has created a thriving artisan workshop in Guatemala, Philippines, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and Cameroon. Supporting indigenous cultures, he partners with tribal chiefs, Arabian sheikhs, and village artisans to make sustainable furniture with its own life and spirit. I would also like to welcome Zolaykha Sherzad, founder and creative designer of Zarif Design, collaborating with Afghan women to adapt traditional Afghan cuts and textiles to modern design, founding member of the School of Hope, which enables children to receive an education in Afghanistan. We want to welcome Zolaykha and Tucker. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Well, Tucker, I would like to begin with you, and I would like to know what inspired you initially in your life to start this work that you're doing to help artisans, and then to start your business and see it as something you would want to contribute in your life. Please tell us.
Oh, thank you, Darlene. Well, it began almost 40 years ago when I had left a life as a monastic to travel to the highlands of Guatemala to work with a weaving cooperative. And it was in a very remote area of the country. And in order to get there, we passed several groups of marching armies, military, guerrilla, and who knows what, all carrying guns. And so it was a tense atmosphere that we arrived into this weaving cooperative and presented designs, threads, and orders for material. And this was the beginning of my introduction to a unique perspective of living and practicing. While I was there, I witnessed genocide. I witnessed villages being leveled. And it became my passion to find a way to provide an expression to these people to speak to the rest of the world. And so I gathered elements that the Maya were selling and presented them to New York City. And to my good fortune, the New York Times paid attention to what I was trying to do of highlighting the culture of Guatemala during these desperate times. So the work that I presented was celebrated in New York, which completely changed how the Guatemalans saw their own work. So that I saw housewives from the capital going into the highlands, stopping the fighting because they wanted to purchase some of these beautiful pieces that I had brought to New York City. So that very much impressed me, the power that was at my disposal as a New York citizen to shine a light on people that would not necessarily be heard from. So that started my career of working with indigenous people and bringing their work to the New York marketplace. And I have seen other situations where people would put down their guns to trade, to speak about their culture, to celebrate the life that they live. So that began my enthusiasm for traveling to remote corners of the world to help uplift these people, to help tell their stories, to help protect their forests. And so it's been a very exciting and wild ride these last 40 years.
Well, wonderful, wonderful. And I know that, that you have made a lot of difference in lives as you have done this work, right? All across the world, right? And what would you say has been the biggest lesson that you have learned with regard to peace education and your mission of peace education in life?
Oh, thank you. Well, it reminds me of the time, 25 years after I was there in Guatemala, I got a call from the design center in Guatemala, and they reported to me that, Tucker, the time that you worked here, we had more indigenous work available to the world. And now, 25 years later, we see that we have very little. And would you consider coming back and working? To which I asked, when were you looking to have this showcase open? They said December 2012, to which I said, well, I've got to speak to the Mayan elders, right? And so they agreed to gather the Mayan elders for me to come and speak to them about how I could express or what was their message to the world during this important time, during the transition of the Mayan calendar. So I, again, traveled into the Mayan highlands, very close to where I was previously. And the Mayan elders, there's 12 of them, greeted me and were very warm and attentive. And I asked them what I could do, to which they all said, take us to the UN. We want to address the UN and clarify what our Mayan calendar means. And I was taken aback because it was completely different from what I had imagined me doing. But I said, yes, I'll do that. Of course, I'll do that. And with the help of tens, if not hundreds, of friends and acquaintances, we hosted 6 of the Mayan elders, just as the United Nations was reopening after renovations. And to the thrill of the Mayan elders, they were able to shake the hand of the General Secretary and bless the edifice of the United Nations. So I was struck by the Mayans wanting to simply pray simply acknowledge the edifices of peace on this planet. And that was enough for them. They really just wanted to stand in front of the United Nations and declare their appreciation.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now I would like to go to Zolaykha, and I would like to ask you, you obviously have been through a great deal recently. So I would like for you to talk to us about the point in time when you decided that you wanted to take your artistry and start to work with the women in your country and work for different projects that you felt were being called to you, I suppose, from your heart or from your inspiration that you saw around you while you were growing up. Or I would like to know your perspective on how you got to where you are now as, you know, designer, artist, and entrepreneur. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me in this conversation with Tucker. I think my journey starts in 79 when I left Afghanistan. In fact, I left Afghanistan in 79 when I was a child as a refugee. And I think I was lucky to leave at that time. I was a refugee in Switzerland where I studied, where I did my School of Architecture, and then moved to New York in '94. And when I was in New York looking at Afghanistan back as an individual, as an architect, and finding myself in a way kind of powerless in the face of what was happening in Afghanistan felt so remote from who I was. And I was really looking like connecting myself through my work as an architect back to Afghanistan. So that was somehow my journey in a way that I left Afghanistan early on. But then around 2000, I really felt the need that I wanted to reconnect through education because who I really felt it was through my education that allowed me to practice architecture or even think about going back and supporting education. So that became really something that was like a driving, like a vision that I want to go on back and support, you know, those children that were not in the same case I was as a refugee. They were in Afghanistan being challenged, not only not having education, but also security and, you know, everything else you can imagine, the civil war and then the Taliban. So in 2000, I started a non-for-profit with a group of friends in New York, Afghan expats to support schools. Once I was able to go back to Afghanistan after 2002, I just realized that beside education, there was so much more. There were so many layers. The country was not destroyed only physically, but emotionally. There was a cultural identity. You know, people were coming from different parts of the world to return to Afghanistan, but there was a loss that was bigger than just the country itself in terms of the destruction that has been going on for those 20 years. And I really felt like I could utilize my practice, my knowledge of design into creating a space for artisans or craftsmen to give them this opportunity to go back to their tradition. I mean, education was a priority as well, but I felt like how many of those students will be able to do higher education? Not many of them. And what was really lacking was apprenticeship, craftsmanship for people who didn't know how to read and write, and that includes women. And I really focused on how I could empower those women within the skills that they knew. And the needle, the sewing, all of that is within each house. In a way, every woman knew how to sew. And the same way, you know, most of the the master tailor that I hired and that trained were also had this practice, but it wasn't utilized because there was no value into this craft of sewing and weaving when I went back in 2002, 2004. So I felt like there was an opportunity to go back to the traditional craft, which is the weaving mainly. It wasn't creating a fashion design. It wasn't really the purpose of creating a brand. It was mainly using fashion or a textile as a way to empower different communities, from the weavers, spinners, to the sewers. And the second part that comes back to building peace, I felt like it's important to give back a sense of dignity, not only to the women, but also to the men that have lost years of their life into this war. How can we bring also those women back into a platform where they're respected as professional, not as mothers and wives, and creating a space for them the same way we create for students a space to go to school and educate themselves. How could I create a space for those women to come to a space that is safe, an environment that is inspiring, an environment that is acceptable in a way that, from different backgrounds, are considered as valuable human beings. So I started in 2005 with 8 women and one master tailor. This is the way Zarif kind of started. Zarif means fine, precious. That was somehow a goal that we wanted to achieve. Why this goal of Zarif, which means fine? In a way to project something that is beautiful, that is fine, for all of us to work towards. But again, I feel like this brand, those products are just the result of this group of people working together, living together, spending time together on creating an environment that is peaceful. And also through this work, this practice, healing, a practice you kind of forget about your problem in a way that becomes, through this practice, I feel like there's space for them to just immerse themselves into the present and let go of the problems. It's not, hopefully with time, they were resolving all those issues economically, emotionally, and I have been witness throughout those 16 years to see the difference of those in their lives, and those women to be much more empowered, self-expressed. My manager is a woman, the supervisor is a woman. So it's a woman-run business in Kabul. And I think the second part of this story of Zarif is really for me as an Afghan American to be able to create a link between Afghanistan and the West. And that was very important for me because there's a lot of preconceived ideas about Afghanistan the same way from the West. How can I create that understanding through art and craft? Of course, politics is it's another layer that has come into all of that, and I am mainly focused in working with those artisans and creating those moments of peace. But unfortunately, politics and all of that has prevented us once again, to continue this practice at this moment. So I have been out of Afghanistan. The last time it was in 2020. So I've been out, and I was, I go about 4 times a year to support my team and connect with the artisans, create and build bridges. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go back, and things have really shifted very quickly within this last few weeks. So I feel again we're on hold. We're waiting to see what's next and how I can continue that the work I do through this practice. And I'm hoping to be able to continue.
Thank you. And I'm struck that your desire was to help, and then you created a way to help. And I'm struck also that while you had this education, you had Afghanistan in your heart, Western education, but you had Afghanistan in your heart. And as you grew, there was a longing to reinforce that connection. And so it's beautiful because it wasn't that you wanted to do a brand. The brand came out of the desire to build bridges. The brand came out of, and your work and your artistry came out of the desire to work with the women and just make some space for them to be more of themselves, to be more empowered, as you say, right? So it was peace education that came out of a peaceful approach, I guess is my point, and a desire to reach out and to improve things. And I believe that when things start that way, similarly to Tucker's story, then we find this rich growth and development that can become something that you maybe didn't anticipate in the beginning. What would you say, you know, in terms of things that have surprised you as you worked with the women there and worked with different people to make your efforts possible? What would you say?
First of all, I think there was a desire for myself, not to help, but I was trying to find myself. Where is my space as an Afghan? You know, how could I empower myself? And this is something we have talked with Tucker very often, that as a designer or as an architect, how could I participate in the society? And I felt like the longing for Afghanistan, where I felt there was a need for that. And what surprised me and where I am also very much moved, I didn't do much. I was there as almost as a link. I basically, I was part of that chain. I was just one person that kind of initiated something, and it just created so much around it. It allowed them to see something because of my naivety maybe, or my perspective of coming from outside. Something just created almost that movement that when I started, then everything just went by itself. You know, there was that beautiful, I think, magic of life that when you have a vision that is shared, suddenly things just worked its own way. And I really felt moved by that. And just, I mean, I have learned myself so much by making the leap to go, which was first lots of fear. You know, what do I do? Where do I start? But I think I was moved the fact that once I did the leap to go, doors opened up. I learned so much. I rediscovered my own culture. I rediscovered, you know, the richness of the culture, the people, the resilience. There, so much that I have learned. I was just talking this morning with my manager and with another staff. They were thanking me, you know, for what I do right now, which I don't do much, right? I feel like I'm powerless. But I just told them that how much I have learned and how much I am thankful for those 16 years. And that I'm hoping that we can continue that. But it was really, I'm so grateful that I was able to be part of their life and learn so much. And I feel like this is a moment for the whole world again to see how much those Afghans, women and men, have been resilient in the face of so many wars and, you know, invasions. And the humanity that is there, it's so inspiring that we need to be compassionate, and we need to really not look back and you know, turn back and really take this as an opportunity for us. I mean, as I say, it was an opportunity for me to really become who I am. I feel I would have not been the same person if I wasn't part of that project.
It's so true. And you make a point that has been made over and over throughout this program, which is that an individual can make a difference, but it takes collective actions. It takes a community to make a change. It takes a community to make a change in culture. So to bring about a culture of peace, we have to operate in a holistic way. And also, you've talked about the way in which it's fulfilling in and of itself to feel like you've connected with other people of like minds and that you're part of working on something larger. And sometimes, as you found, that you feel like, you're just one contributor, but other people are seeing that you have such an extraordinary input. And I would say that because of your experience, your life experience, that you have a richness that other people can perceive, and the women that you're working with and the people that you're working with, because that's your journey and that's who you are. And I would like to now go to Tucker and ask you, Tucker, I believe that your work has really shaped your life to a large extent. Your international travel, your personal interests, everything has come sort of to bring you to where you are in terms of your outlook, your work with peace education, your work with helping empower communities and artisans all around the world. And how did you decide to work together?
Well, we share very dear friends who had been encouraging me to meet Zolaykha for some time. And when finally we met, I was struck by her humility, her strength, what she stood for, for the women of Afghanistan. And to celebrate how they dress, how they are, is so exciting for me, because it breaks down boundaries, it breaks down barriers, and it helps people to see that we are truly brothers and sisters. So I had never heard of anyone trying to do what Zolaykha was trying to do and continues to do in Afghanistan. So I wanted to throw my weight, my showroom, my influence behind her to strengthen her so that she could carry on. And so I invited her to join me in my showroom and show her work. And I felt that it brought animation, it brought all of a sudden culture through thread, through tailoring to life. And this magnificent experience of the Afghan perspective on textile. I was fascinated to learn that India considers Afghanistan the source of their design inspiration, fashion inspiration. So for the region, the Afghans are considered lords and independent thinkers, innovators, and people of great strength. And so I learned a lot from Zolaykha about the area, about the people, and she animated my showroom with color, with culture. So thank you. Yeah.
I felt like, the design center, the showroom of Tucker was a home for me, because everything, even though it was so different from Afghanistan, the woodwork is so different, but in a way I felt like there was this authenticity of the handmade. Therefore, there was no more differences, because even though the shapes are different, the colors are different, but the techniques, still the same hands, the same way of cutting, the same way of weaving, but with a different language. So, and I think that's inspiring. I mean, for me, I love going there and having my, those coats being totally almost showcased among those wood designs on tables. So, yeah, I think it would be nice to talk about, and I think that's very important for us, the connection between those cultures that goes beyond that kind of boundaries. And, this is Afghanistan, this is, Afghanistan is part of Central Asia, or there is a link between all those cultures. And what we're looking with Tucker, and I think for me, is to find the commonality, the humanity, and a woman is a woman everywhere, the same needs, and how can we find a way to empower them within that context that they are, confined.
Kabul is one of the oldest cities in the world, and the culture there and the rich culture there that has been there, the skills, the craftsmanship, they're here still today. Yeah. And I believe that we, as a human race, have to understand that we are all connected and that we have to honor the contribution of every culture around the world. We have to honor the history of the human race. We have to embrace humanity in all of its parts, in all of its diversity, in all of its beauty. And we have to understand, in my opinion, that artists are there to help us see the way. I believe that art and artists have a gift to show us the light, even when there's dark days. During the pandemic, what happened? The artists came forward with music that soothed the soul. They came forward with artworks to help themselves process what was going on, as well as others, because the artist shares. They share their inspiration. We have to, as a society, part of us moving towards peace and peace education and peace culture is to understand the role of the arts in human life. We have covered so much territory and learned so much in such a beautiful way. And what I would like to do now is talk more about your process, talk more about your actual work and the actual creativity that you have, as well as the goals that you have for your artists and craftspeople. So I would like to begin this conversation with asking Zolaykha to describe the photographs, some of the photographs that you sent me. And the first photograph that really struck me was the one that includes a man, a little boy, and yourself. Could you tell us a little bit about what's going on in that photo?
Yeah, sure. I was visiting the spinning center in Herat, which is the silk production from the cocoon to really the silk yarn. And what's beautiful about this moment, and it's really seeing the different generations. Yeah, there's the grandson, there's the grandfather who has that practice since years and years. And in fact, he's one of the only one left doing this practice, because we received more and more silk that is produced from outside, from Pakistan, from China. The one that is from Afghanistan, the facilities are very small and therefore very minimum quantity. I was, it was a privilege to be able to work with those artisans that are really that craftsmanship that is so precise and at the same time so simple. So they can do it in different, they don't need electricity. Somehow they're able to produce it despite the condition. And also what really for me is important, that's why I went there and took those pictures, is to connect the clothes that I am producing to the agriculture, the silkworm that is really, that is produced by a community of farmers, mainly women in Herat, which is Eastern Afghanistan. So it's really connecting different communities of farmers to the weavers, the spinners, the weavers, the dyers, until the garment. So that's the kind of the aspect of the work that is so important as well.
Well, I also was struck by another photo that you sent me that has a gentleman and 3 women looking at fabric. Could you tell me what's going on there at that level of the process?
That's a specific moment of our training program. Zarif has been doing training program throughout the years with other partners, other organization. And this is a training for a new group of women in how to make patterns. So it's for them to really understand the kind of the architecture of the clothing and the measurement. And I think this aspect is very important because Zarif is not just about production, which means that you just follow the direction on the of practicing of sewing, but also learning the structure, what understanding a pattern, understanding how a garment is done, the measurement. So I think those moments are very intense in a way because they have to. Most of them doesn't write or read, but through this practice of a pattern that is something concrete, and then they're able to sew it, to measure, to understand the different scales, different sizes. So, and also it's a moment of a group. Those women are all focused in one, master tailor telling them, on each of them are understanding the way they can on different levels. And it's a moment within the practice of just learning. And I think it's very important throughout those production to have moments when you learn, when you observe, and when you dare to cut a garment, because some of those women have never done any pattern making or cutting. So that is that moment. Although, as you can see, women and men are working, their focus is the garment. They just forget who they are, even their level, they forget. I mean, the master tailor, he's the one who leads them, who guides them into understanding the production process. But I think it's beautiful to kind of immerse themselves into this educational process rather than just practicing or production as a systematic.
Right. Well, I think you bring up a good point, is how they get focused on what they're doing, and then they enjoy it, and then they get into a place where the bodies that they're in don't matter, male, female, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
And so they become humans, yes, working together, enjoying themselves.
This continuous involvement and learning, and learning from each other after they have, then they go on their own practice, and then they gather together and they look at their work they've done. So it's, it's a slow production. We don't produce a lot, but within Zarif, I feel that to commit those moments when we teach, when we transfer the knowledge, it's important.
The point that I want to bring up here is that although an art might be ancient, that still there's a level of skill, there's a level of understanding of geometry, there's a level of understanding of weight and physics and how fabrics move and everything. I mean, it's very complicated, but when an artist is talented, they can make it look very simple. But I just wanted to highlight that these are skills that human beings have had, and that the artistry that I see there is just so, it's just so impressive. And I think the preservation of the skill, the artistry, is also so integral to preserving the culture. And I also feel that preserving these types of things are very important for the future. So, right? And so the last photograph I wanted to ask you about is the one with the young lady who's so intently drawing with the pencil. Could you tell us a little bit about what she's doing in that level of the process?
So in fact, that's the second phase or the third phase of the garment, when you add embroidery. In this case, she has how you say, shablon, she's tracing a flower to the garment. It's a beautiful moment because there's this light, and she's very focused because it's very precise. Once you draw on a silk fabric, you cannot make a mistake, because then the embroiderer are not able to really follow those. And the flowers that we're using, they're very fine, very precise. So it requires almost a state of meditation. I think those moments for them to really be careful and again, slow production, but also to connect with their hands and their mind, on being present to that moment of just doing this work. So for me, again, the garment is the result of all those process. But the moment those women are living, from learning, from sewing, from drawing, all of that creates space for them to be peaceful, to be focused, to learn. Yeah, I feel like the last one is really a meditative, a healing, being in the present, especially when we are right now talking about, there's such a chaos in all levels. But at the end, when you go back to the present of just like even breathing or even holding your pencil, just bring you some peace, because it's hard for them to really make sense of what's happening. I'm just trying to put myself in their space right now, how those women are able to act, within that context. But at the end, you have to go back to their present. I'm hoping I can continue this practice where they have those moments of peace, those moments of focus, without worrying, of bigger issues. That's my perspective within that scale of working with artisans. Of course, everyone have their own goals and actions, but I found it very precious to be able to find peace with the practice of something very simple.
So that's just one sort of like an advantage that artists have, right? Is that if they can find that space and if they can get there, then they also can separate themselves from the trials of their life, right? And so it is a healing space, and it's an important space to preserve, right? So I want to go now to Tucker and ask Tucker about, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
I think for me to create that space of peace, to have clarity in their action afterwards, I feel like those moments give them some level of wholeness, on empowerment, then probably they will see more clear what are the next stages. And this is the way I feel right now for myself. I need to practice. I need something very simple in order to move forward and see what's next for me within that chaos that we all live right now within Afghanistan and the world. So in their scale, I think we need to start their work as soon as I can. As soon as things are a bit more stable, I would like to see them back in their sewing machine and in their table, and have them, continue this work in order to find some level of clarity. And
yes, well, there are millions of people who share your wish and desire, and there's a lot of people that want to put their efforts and resources behind that dream that you have. So now I do want to go to Tucker, and you've heard this conversation, and I'd like for you to now tell us about your level of the process and how you view your role connecting with what Zolaykha does in her work.
Well, thank you. Thank you both. In my work, I find a lot of similarities to what Zolaykha has been talking about. To create a product, whether it's a garment or a piece of furniture or a piece of art, it often involves dozens of not only hands, but atmospheres, spaces that people have to be present, and they have to do their part in the project and pass the project along. And I think, like Zolaykha, going back to the thread, I want to go back to the forest to be sure that the raw materials that are being utilized are honored, and whenever possible, don't cut trees, don't disrupt that environment. Find other ways, whether it's excavating wood from under the water or recycling architecture. Find ways to use materials at hand to create. So that's been my drive. And, our rapidly evolving culture has disrupted systems, causing agricultural tools, causing architecture to basically be turned upside down. So that the elements of those processes can then be reinvented to do something else. So again, remembering that all of this takes a very complex system to pull off. So if something degrades in one element, to work to try and replace it with something else, to keep that fabric, that network of people moving along. And then, of course, that's production in a locale that is then sent to a distribution center, or a center that where there are people willing to buy and to commission. So all of these systems need to be in place for a successful experiment, creation, environment to continue. And it often takes a lot of trial and error. It takes making mistakes.
It's important for humans to aspire, grow, produce, go to the stars. All those things are important. But it's also important for us to take care of one another. And it's also important for us to move towards the future, a culture of peace and a culture of sustainability, which is so beautifully outlined in the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, right? So it's wonderful that we've taken this view of your work and Zolaykha's work. And I want to say thank you so much for participating and for giving us this time. So tell me, do either of you have any final thoughts that you would like to say?
Well, peace education, I do believe that teaching and training, carrying on these traditions, are integral to building a peaceful world. I've seen it in multiple locations, and often in disrupted locations, places that have experienced, like Afghanistan, like Guatemala, like Sri Lanka. The process of rebuilding is really caring for one another. It's being responsible for your part in the puzzle, whether it's a purchaser, know where your stuff is coming from, whether it's a creative person, to be honoring, to be respectful for our environment and seek to preserve it or pass it on to the next generation in such a way that it's more, it's richer, it's fuller. I really appreciate the focus on this complexity that goes on behind the scenes to make something happen. And the importance of that atmosphere for conducive, to be able to create beauty. You have to feel that beauty to be able to pass it along.
Yes.
So thank you. Yeah.
And I so agree, it would be wonderful when we reestablish human values to recognize that appreciation of beauty in and of itself is a gift.
Yes.
And having worked with people that have lost hearing or lost eyesight, and when you see the way in which then they have to navigate the world and reattach to the world in different ways, right? Then it just brings another level of appreciation for the majesty and the complexity of the human body and human life, right? Yeah. It's not easy human life, but we're all working together to try to make it better and easier. Zolaykha, would you like to have some closing remarks, please?
Yeah, I think the closing would be going back to the market. I feel like why do we need to sell this product, and why would I make those products? I think it's also to connect cultures that goes. Peace comes with true understanding and appreciation of each other's culture. And, there's no need for anyone to wear a jacket that comes from Afghanistan, but by wearing this jacket, you honor that culture, you try to understand it. And I feel like we talk more and more about telling the story about the artisans, which I found it's very valuable. But at the same time, the jacket carries the story. We don't need to label it. We don't need to narrate it. And I think just valuing a piece, and that's why I found the work that I do with Zarif equally important for the one that wears it and purchases it. The person that wears it is empowered, not only empowered into supporting the community of weavers and tailors, but empowered of carrying that message out there. And at least where I wear a jacket or something, I really feel like it adds something, a value to my own life, and it connects us as a world of a global community rather than being, okay, I am Afghan. And so in a way, it's so beautiful when we see those different cultures being shared through food, through language, through music, and it's really making our life richer. And I think that's where we're not. I'm not looking for charity, or it's about richness and adding to each other's life. So the market, when we call it the market, it should be an exchange, culture exchange, rather than a market. Unfortunately, this is the way it's called, but a place of exchange, the way it was in the past, through the Silk Road, people would exchange goods as currency, and music was transferred from one culture to another one. And that was the way they would live, is just exchange, from goods to exchange to poetry, philosophy, and that makes our humanity. And unfortunately now everything is valued, as I think Tucker has very often talks about it, is just the dollars, and there's nothing behind. And how can we go back beyond that money and go to really the stories? When I'm saying stories, it's not the stories, because even that word has been misused, and I think it's not about it's about the people, really.
Yes. And stories that are healing are important, and stories that are revealing about culture, and stories that preserve culture, right?
Yeah.
Especially among oral traditions. So I really, really appreciate the way that you sort of summarized. That's the purpose of today, is bringing human values into perspective for how we want to move forward to create a global culture of peace.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you both so much for this time. And thank you so much for everything that you're doing for everyone.
One thing is clear from our first Global Peace Education Day conference today. Peace doesn't happen just by talking about it. Peace takes more than goodwill. Peace takes skill and know-how and practice. Building defenses of peace in the minds of women and men, that's what peace education is all about. That's why we ask everyone here today to join with the Peace Education Network and urge the UN General Assembly to establish an official Global Peace Education Day to be celebrated each year. Recognizing that lasting peace requires sharing the necessary skills and know-how. Please type your name and contact information into the Q&A right now if you wish to join the Peace Education Network in this campaign. Also, if you would like to participate in the future peace education workshops, or if you would like to propose a workshop, please type it in the Q&A. You can also let us know your impressions of this conference, what you learned, what you would like to have learned, and what we can do to be better in the future. Tomorrow marks the 40th anniversary of the United Nations International Day of Peace. Peace Day was established in 1981 by unanimous vote of the United Nations General Assembly. Avon Mattison was a leading voice for Peace Day and still is. She is founder and president of Pathways to Peace, an international peacebuilding education and consulting nonprofit holding consultative status with the UN Economic and Social Council. Now Avon is supporting a Global Peace Education Day. Thank you, everyone, for participating in this first Global Peace Education Day conference. We're planning our next event in November. Please stay in touch through our website and Facebook page. We are going to give Avon Mattison the last word. It has been my privilege to be your host. Thank you.
I had the question, why are we fighting? Why is everyone killing each other and devastating the earth in the name of peace? I just deeply know that everyone comes into this life with a purpose and a gift to give and lessons to learn. And this was just my assignment. I mean, a focus of mine has been threefold. One is to see a Universal Day of Peace established. The second is that this idea of pathways to peace be more prevalent within humanity. And third, that a field of peace building would be established. We were needing to establish a field of peace building that involved what ordinary human beings are doing on a day-to-day basis, but there's nothing to call that field. Because if we are parenting in a way that is creating the best that a child can possibly bring into the world, their gifts, if we are contributing to our local community, if we are harmless towards self and others, if whatever we are doing, whatever pathway to peace we happen to be on, we are contributing to building a culture of peace, and we ourselves are peace builders. Because I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if we could have an identity that we each we know each other by, that is, I'm not this and this and this, I'm this, and I'm also a peace builder. And in addition, I'm contributing to building a culture of peace, not only for myself and for everyone in my life and my community, but for future generations. When any idea actually comes into manifestation and really is of short and long-term service to this planet within humanity, it has to be a group endeavor. It has to be cooperative, it has to be collaborative, and it has to eventually occur to more than one person at one time. And I said, what would you think if we all worked together with your particular ministries and with your nations, that we might create a Universal Day of Peace that could be adopted by a UN resolution? So that began in 1961. And 20 years later, a resolution was passed.